For thousands of years, human beings have asked one of the most fundamental questions imaginable. Where do we come from? Who are we? And how did our species come to exist on this planet? The answers we've sought have taken many forms throughout history, from religious doctrine to scientific inquiry. But there is one theory that has captivated millions of people around the world, a theory that suggests our origins are far stranger and more extraordinary than we ever imagined. This theory speaks of ancient beings called the Anunnaki, powerful extraterrestrial gods who came to Earth from a distant planet and who allegedly engineered the human race as a slave species to mine precious metals. This story has been told and retold in countless books, documentaries, and internet forums. But what is the truth behind these claims? Where does this narrative come from? And what does modern science actually tell us about human origins? Let's begin our journey into this fascinating and controversial topic by understanding what the Anunnaki actually were in the context of ancient history. The Anunnaki were a group of deities in the Sumerian and Babylonian pantheon, pantheons that represent some of the oldest recorded religious systems in human civilization. The word Anunnaki itself comes from ancient Sumerian, combining two elements, An, which means heaven, and Kai, which means earth. Together, these terms create a word meaning princely offspring or the offspring of An. In the ancient religious texts of Mesopotamia, the Anunnaki were portrayed as gods, as divine beings who held significant positions in the cosmic order and in the affairs of humanity. They were revered, worshipped, and feared by the peoples of ancient Sumer and Babylon. In the earliest Sumerian texts, dating back to around 3000 to 2000 BCE, the Anunnaki were described as heavenly beings. They were thought to be direct descendants of An, the sky god, and Kai, the earth goddess. These texts portrayed them as cosmic beings who connected heaven and earth, who operated within a divine hierarchy that governed both the celestial realm and the world of mortals. The name appears in various forms across Mesopotamian literature, including Anuna, Anunnaki, and Anunnaku, reflecting regional differences as the concept spread through different cultures and time periods. As centuries passed and power shifted from Sumerian to Akkadian, Babylonian, and Assyrian cultures, the concept of the Anunnaki evolved and transformed. Originally heavenly beings in the oldest texts, they gradually became associated with the underworld. By the time of Babylonian civilization, and especially during the Neo-Assyrian period between 911 and 612 BCE, the texts describe them as judges of the dead, as beings who presided over the realm of the afterlife. This evolution of religious thought reflects how human civilizations reshape and reinterpret their mythologies as societies change, as new powers rise and fall, and as new theological ideas gain influence. The Babylonian creation epic, known as Enuma Elish, provides one of the most detailed accounts of the Anunnaki and their place in the cosmic hierarchy. In this epic, their role was reorganized, placing them under the authority of Marduk, the chief god of Babylon, as Babylon rose to prominence and became the dominant power in Mesopotamia. One of the primary functions attributed to the Anunnaki in these ancient texts was determining the me, which were understood as divine decrees or universal laws that governed all aspects of civilization. Under the leadership of Enlil, the Anunnaki supposedly established the fates of humanity, deciding the laws of nature, the structure of society, and the destiny of people and nations. Their decisions, according to these mythologies, were final and absolute. Even the other gods had to respect and follow these decrees. This concept reflects the Mesopotamian understanding of an ordered universe, governed by divine laws that mortals must obey. But here is where our story takes a dramatic turn. Here is where ancient mythology intersects with modern claims about extraterrestrial visitation. In 1976, an author named Zecharia Sitchin published a book called The 12th Planet. Sitchin claimed to be a scholar of ancient languages, and he proposed a revolutionary interpretation of these Sumerian texts. Rather than viewing the Anunnaki as mythological deities, Sitchin argued that they were actually extraterrestrial beings, aliens from a distant planet that he called Nibiru. According to Sitchin's interpretation, the Sumerian clay tablets contained encoded historical accounts of these aliens' arrival on Earth, their activities here, their interactions with early human beings. He claimed that Nibiru was a real planet orbiting beyond Neptune on a tremendously elongated elliptical orbit that brought it near Earth only once every 3,600 years. Sitchin's books sold millions of copies worldwide and were translated into more than 25 languages. His ideas resonated with readers who were fascinated by alternative explanations for human origins, who were drawn to the idea that history as traditionally taught might be incomplete or even deliberately obscured. Following in Sitchin's footsteps, other authors, notably Michael Tellinger, expanded upon and promoted these theories. Tellinger's book, Slave Species of the Gods, built directly on Sitchin's work, claiming to reveal compelling new archaeological and genetic evidence for the engineered origins of the human species. These works presented a narrative that has become deeply embedded in popular culture. According to this narrative, approximately 200,000 to 450,000 years ago, Before the Great Flood and during Earth's Pleistocene Ice Age, the Anunnaki arrived on Earth. They came searching for gold, a precious metal they apparently needed for their home planet. Finding this resource here, they made a decision that would alter the course of life on Earth forever. The story goes that these advanced extraterrestrials used genetic engineering to create human beings by combining their own DNA with that of early primate ancestors living on Earth. According to this theory, the Anunnaki deliberately created humans as a slave race, engineered workers who would labor in mines to extract gold and other valuable minerals. The theory claims that humans were designed with limited intelligence and physical capabilities, that the aliens deliberately inactivated more advanced DNA sequences to prevent us from becoming too intelligent or too independent. This enslaved human race would labor for thousands of years under the dominion of these ancient gods, until eventually, according to the narrative, a catastrophic flood wiped out the Anunnaki mining operations and killed most of the human population. The survivors and their descendants would go on to develop the civilizations we know from history, maintaining fragmented memories of their alien creators in the form of religious myths and legends that became distorted and reinterpreted over millennia. This narrative is compelling. It offers an explanation for human consciousness, for our sense of being somehow incomplete, for the presence of advanced knowledge in ancient civilizations. It answers questions about our place in the cosmos, suggesting we are not alone and never have been. But the critical question we must ask ourselves is this narrative supported by evidence? Is it consistent with what modern scholarship tells us about ancient languages and ancient history? Is it compatible with what genetic science reveals about human origins? Let us now turn to what scholarly experts, those who have dedicated their lives to studying ancient languages and archaeological evidence, have to say about these claims. When Zecharia Sitchin wrote his books in the 1970s, only specialists could read the Sumerian language fluently. The cuneiform script was difficult and obscure, accessible only to trained Assyriologists and Sumerologists. This gave Sitchin a certain advantage. Few people could challenge his translations directly. However, as time passed, and resources like the Sumerian lexicon became more widely available, making the language more accessible to non-experts, scholars were able to examine Sitchin's work more carefully. And what they found was deeply problematic. Assyriologists and Sumerologists, scholars who have spent decades studying these ancient texts, have extensively criticized Zecharia Sitchin's work. They argue that his translations are inaccurate and lack academic rigor. His interpretations, they contend, often misrepresent key terms and phrases, leading to sensational conclusions that are not supported by the actual text. Michael S. Heiser, a scholar who has devoted considerable attention to examining Sitchin's claims, has challenged him and other ancient astronaut researchers to produce even a single line of cuneiform text that actually supports the ideas about the Anunnaki that Sitchin has proposed. The challenge has never been adequately answered. Heiser has pointed out that if you actually look at what the clay seals say, if you examine what is known about Sumerian astronomy from cuneiform astronomical texts, and if you understand standard Sumerian iconography, you will find no support for Sitchin's central claims. Sitchin's interpretations require that you ignore what the texts actually say. One famous example involves a Sumerian cylinder seal known as VA 243, now housed in a museum in Berlin. Sitchin claimed that this seal depicts 12 celestial bodies, representing 12 planets in our solar system, with the Anunnaki possessing knowledge of Nibiru long before modern astronomy discovered it. But scholars point out that this interpretation requires ignoring what the seal actually depicts, ignoring published scholarly work on Sumerian astronomy, and ignoring the standard conventions of Sumerian artistic representation. The seal almost certainly does not show what Sitchin claims it shows. Beyond the question of translations, there is the question of gold mining itself. The theory hinges on the idea that the Anunnaki came to Earth specifically to mine gold, that they needed this precious metal for some purpose on their home planet. But scholars of ancient Mesopotamia have examined the extensive Sumerian textual record, and they have found no references to the Anunnaki mining gold. The Sumerians did use gold extensively for decoration, for trade, and for religious artifacts. Gold held great value in their society, but the texts describe no alien involvement in gold extraction whatsoever. The entire premise of the mining narrative appears to rest on a misreading or misinterpretation of the ancient sources. Furthermore, the methodology used by Sitchin and other ancient astronaut theorists has been criticized as fundamentally flawed. They tend to approach ancient texts with a predetermined conclusion and then select and interpret passages that seem to support that conclusion while ignoring or dismissing passages that contradict it. This is the opposite of how scholarly research should function. Proper scholarship requires approaching ancient sources with an open mind, allowing the texts themselves to guide interpretation and being willing to revise conclusions if new evidence warrants it. In addition to problems with the interpretation of ancient texts, the ancient astronaut theory also faces serious astronomical and scientific objections. Sitchin's claim that Nibiru exists as a planet beyond Neptune with a 3,600-year orbit is not supported by any astronomical evidence. If such a large planetary body were actually orbiting our sun, modern telescopes and satellites would have detected it long ago. Scientists monitoring near-Earth objects and tracking the movements of planets in our solar system have found no evidence whatsoever for Nibiru's existence. NASA has stated clearly that Nibiru does not exist. The supposed orbital mechanics of such a planet would also make it highly unlikely that it could escape detection by modern astronomy, or that it could approach Earth in the manner Sitchin described. Scientists who have examined Sitchin's work have been forced to conclude that his astronomical claims are not based in scientific fact. His ideas have been rejected by the scientific community, by historians, by archaeologists, and by experts in ancient languages. His work is regarded as pseudoscience and pseudo-history by the vast majority of the academic community. So where does this leave us? If the ancient astronaut theory is not supported by evidence, if scholarly experts consistently reject its claims, then what does modern science actually tell us about human origins? The answer lies in the fields of genetics, anthropology, archaeology, and evolutionary biology. These disciplines have conducted centuries of research, accumulated mountains of evidence, and developed sophisticated methodologies for understanding how humans came to exist on this planet. The evidence they have gathered paints a picture of human origins that is no less remarkable than any science fiction narrative, but it is grounded in testable, verifiable facts. Let us explore what this evidence tells us. Scientific research makes clear that human beings are primates. We share physical and genetic similarities with other primate species, particularly with apes. Our closest living relatives are chimpanzees, and genetic evidence shows that the last common ancestor of all humans and modern chimpanzees lived between 6 million and 9 million years ago in Africa. This ancestor, like all life on Earth, was a product of natural evolution, the process by which organisms change over time through the accumulation of genetic variations that affect survival and reproduction. Large and complex brain, the ability to make and use tools, and the capacity for language all evolved over millions of years through natural selection. These traits made our ancestors increasingly successful at surviving and reproducing in their environments, and so they became more prevalent in the population over time. Many of the advanced traits we associate with modern humanity, including complex symbolic expression, art, and the elaborate cultural diversity we see around the world today, emerged mainly during the past 100,000 years. This is a blink of an eye in evolutionary terms, yet it represents an enormous amount of change. Within this relatively brief period, humans developed it. Language, created art, built civilizations, and began to reshape the planet itself. The evidence for this evolutionary history is overwhelming. It comes from multiple independent sources. Fossil records show the progression of human development, with bones and teeth revealing how our ancestors' bodies changed over time. Archaeological records document the evolution of tool use and the emergence of cultural practices. Most importantly for our purposes, genetic evidence provides perhaps the most compelling support for evolutionary theory. Genetic research has revealed that all humans alive today share common ancestors. By studying the DNA of populations around the world and analyzing genetic variation, scientists can trace human lineages backward in time, determining where populations originated and how they dispersed across the globe. This research consistently confirms what we call the out-of-Africa model of human migration. Modern humans, Homo sapiens, first appeared in Africa approximately 200,000 to 300,000 years ago. The DNA of all living people can be traced back to the African continent, and the oldest fossils of our species have all been found there. From Africa, modern humans began migrating to other parts of the world in significant numbers around 60,000 years ago. As they encountered new environments with different climates, different foods, different diseases and challenges, natural selection continued to work, resulting in genetic adaptations that allowed various populations to thrive in their specific environments. The evidence also reveals that human genetic history is more complex than previously believed. Recent groundbreaking research from the University of Cambridge, announced in 2025, found evidence that modern humans are the result of a genetic mixing event between two ancient populations that diverged around 1.5 million years ago. Approximately 300,000 years ago, these two groups came back together and interbred with one group, contributing roughly 80% of the genetic makeup of modern humans, and the other contributing approximately 20%. This ancient mixing event contributed a much larger proportion of genetic material than the later interbreeding with Neanderthals, which occurred around 50,000 years ago, and contributed only about 2% of the DNA found in non-African modern humans. These findings come from advanced analysis of full genome sequences from the 1000 Genomes Project, a global initiative that sequenced DNA from populations across Africa, Asia, Europe, and the Americas. The research was published in the prestigious journal Nature Genetics and represents the current cutting edge of our understanding of human genetic history. What this evidence tells us is that human origins involved complex interactions between different populations over millions of years, not the sudden genetic engineering described in ancient astronaut theories. Our species arose through natural evolutionary processes, through the accumulated small changes that occur when organisms adapt to their environments over vast stretches of time. Now, you might ask, could some of this DNA evidence be interpreted as evidence of alien intervention? Could the genetic mixing events be evidence of genetic engineering by extraterrestrials? The answer is no. The genetic variation we see in humans is entirely consistent with what we would expect from natural evolutionary processes. The DNA sequences show clear evidence of mutation and adaptation. We see the genetic signatures of natural selection at work. We can trace our genetic relationship to other primates, showing a clear evolutionary pathway from common ancestors to modern humans. If extraterrestrials had engineered us, we would expect to see very different patterns in our genetic material. We would expect to find genetic sequences that appear to have been deliberately inserted or modified in ways inconsistent with natural evolution. We would expect to see evidence of the engineering process itself. Instead, what we find is evidence that is perfectly explained by natural evolutionary mechanisms that we fully understand. Furthermore, if humans had been genetically engineered only hundreds of thousands of years ago, there would be clear evidence of this in our genome. We would find genetic sequences that distinctly separated us from our evolutionary ancestors. But instead, what we find is a continuous genetic lineage, with our genome showing clear similarities to the genomes of earlier human species, like Neanderthals and Denisovans, as well as more distant ancestors. The genetic evidence tells a story of gradual change and adaptation, not sudden creation. Let us consider also the fossil record. Scientists have discovered thousands of fossil specimens representing various human ancestors spanning millions of years. These fossils document the gradual evolution of human anatomy. We can see how the brain case expanded over time, how the face changed shape, how the teeth modified to suit different diets, how the skeleton adapted for bipedalism, and eventually for modern human physiology. This fossil record is not perfect, and it is not complete. Fossilization is a rare event, and we do not have specimens from every evolutionary stage. But the specimens we do have form a coherent picture, a narrative of gradual change that is entirely consistent with evolutionary theory. If humans had been created suddenly and completely formed by alien engineers, we should not see this kind of gradual progression in the fossil record. We should see, instead, anatomically modern humans appearing suddenly with no clear ancestors. But that is not what the fossil record shows. The archaeological record also provides evidence for human evolution. Archaeological sites worldwide document the development of human culture and technology. The oldest known stone tools date back approximately 2.6 million years and show evidence of intentional manufacture. Over millions of years, tool technology became increasingly sophisticated, with different designs emerging as humans adapted to different environments and discovered new uses for their tools. Eventually, we see the emergence of art, of symbolic expression, of ritual behavior, all things that modern humans do but other animals do not. This archaeological evidence also shows a gradual progression, not a sudden appearance of fully formed civilization. If aliens had created us or taught us advanced knowledge, we would expect to see sophisticated technology appear suddenly in the archaeological record. But instead, we see technology developing gradually, with each innovation building on previous discoveries. Beyond the physical evidence, there is also the question of plausibility. Let us think about what the ancient astronaut theory requires us to believe. We are asked to believe that extraterrestrial beings traveled to Earth from a distant star system multiple times over hundreds of thousands of years. We are asked to believe they possessed technology so advanced that they could manipulate human genetics with precision, yet they left no technological artifacts, no evidence of their presence beyond ambiguous interpretations of ancient mythology. We are asked to believe they enslaved an entire species for mining operations, yet there is no archaeological evidence of alien mining infrastructure or extraterrestrial presence. We are asked to believe all of this happened without leaving the kinds of clear, unambiguous evidence that any reasonable investigator would expect from such extraordinary claims. By contrast, the evolutionary explanation for human origins requires only that we accept that natural processes, which we can observe and test in laboratories today, worked over millions of years to produce the diversity of life we see on Earth. We do not need to invoke any extraterrestrial visitors. We do not need to postulate unknown technology or hidden artifacts. The evidence for evolution is abundant, comes from multiple independent sources, and is consistent across disciplines. Scientists continue to refine our understanding of exactly how evolution worked, but the fundamental fact of evolution, the reality that organisms change over time through natural processes, is as well established as any fact in science. So why then does the ancient astronaut theory persist? Why do millions of people continue to believe in the Anunnaki and their role in creating humanity? There are several reasons. First, these theories appeal to our sense of wonder, to our desire to believe we are part of something larger and more extraordinary than ordinary. The idea that we were created by alien gods is, in some ways, more exciting than the idea that we evolved through natural processes. Second, these theories provide simple answers to complex questions. Human origins is genuinely complicated, involving millions of years of evolution, countless species, extinction events, and environmental changes. The idea that it was all engineered by aliens is much simpler, even if it is wrong. Third, these theories can appeal to our skepticism of authority and established institutions. If scholars have been wrong about things before, the reasoning goes, maybe they are wrong about human origins too. This is not unreasonable skepticism, but it can be taken too far when we reject evidence-based scholarship without engaging seriously with the evidence. Additionally, the idea of ancient aliens has deep roots in human culture. Throughout history, humans have looked at advanced civilizations, at impressive monuments, and assumed that they must have been built with divine or superhuman assistance. We have difficulty accepting that our own species could have accomplished such feats through ingenuity, cooperation, and hard work. This tendency reflects something about human psychology, about our sense of inferiority when faced with the achievements of our ancestors. But the truth is, our ancestors were just as intelligent, just as creative, just as capable as we are. They may not have had modern technology, but they had brains that worked just as well as ours do. They were fully modern humans, and they could accomplish remarkable things. It is important also to consider what accepting the ancient astronaut theory would mean for our understanding of human dignity and agency. If we accept that humans were engineered as slaves, that we were created to serve extraterrestrial masters, that our intelligence was deliberately limited by our creators, then we are accepting a story that diminishes human worth. It suggests we are not the authors of our own destiny, that we are the creations of others. By contrast, the evolutionary explanation, while not assigning any special cosmic significance to humans, at least suggests that we are products of natural processes, that we emerge through the same mechanisms that created all life on Earth. We are connected to all other living things, part of a vast web of life that has been evolving for billions of years. This perspective, while it may not provide the comfort of knowing we were created by powerful beings, at least respects human autonomy and the genuine achievements of human civilization. The question of human origins is ultimately a question about how we understand ourselves and our place in the universe. It is a question that has profound philosophical, spiritual, and psychological dimensions. People are naturally drawn to narratives that seem to answer these deep questions. The ancient astronaut theory provides a narrative, one that has appeal and that speaks to something in the human imagination. But as fascinating as this narrative is, we have a responsibility to distinguish between stories that capture our imagination and stories that are supported by evidence. Science is not about rejecting wonder or mystery. Science is about investigating the world carefully, gathering evidence, testing claims, and following the evidence wherever it leads. When we do this with the question of human origins, the evidence consistently points not to extraterrestrial engineering, but to millions of years of natural evolution. This does not mean that the ancient Anunnaki are unworthy of study. They were important figures in the religious and cultural life of ancient civilizations. Understanding how the Sumerians and Babylonians understood their gods, what values and beliefs these deities represented, tells us much about these ancient peoples. We can appreciate the mythology for its cultural and historical significance without needing to believe it is literal history. We can recognize that the ancients left us remarkable texts and remarkable ruins, and marvel at their accomplishments without needing to attribute those accomplishments to alien visitors. We can respect the achievements of ancient peoples by recognizing them as fully human, as intelligent and capable as we are. The Anunnaki are fascinating figures in the history of human thought and human civilization. But they were gods, created by human imagination, not visitors from distant planets. Human origins themselves are remarkable, involving millions of years of evolution, countless species, and the emergence of consciousness and self-awareness. This is a story no less wonderful than any mythology, and it is a story supported by evidence we can examine and test. As we continue to study human origins, as new discoveries are made and our understanding grows more sophisticated, we honor both the achievements of our ancestors and the power of the scientific method that allows us to understand our past. The truth about human origins may be different from the narratives we once believed, but it is truth grounded in evidence, in reason, and in our best understanding of how the natural world works. The Anunnaki remind us of our eternal desire to understand ourselves and our origins. They remind us that humans have always looked to the stars and wondered about our place in the cosmos. These are noble impulses, but they are impulses best served by following evidence where it leads, by embracing what we can learn through careful investigation, and by marveling at the genuine wonders that science has revealed about our universe and about ourselves. The real story of human origins may not involve ancient gods or alien engineers, but it is a story of profound beauty, a story of life emerging from non-life, of consciousness arising from matter, and of our species gradually becoming aware of the universe in which we find ourselves. That is a story worth telling, and it is a story supported by evidence.